Convince Me podcast, where we're on a mission to convince you to step out of your gaming comfort zone and try something new. So let's get to convincing. Last week, Darren and I talked about our games to convince each other to play. My game was... Darren, do you remember?
A little to the left.
A little to the left. A very nice, cozy game that I enjoy playing and was very cathartic. And Darren's game was Indivisible, which I haven't gotten around to playing, but I was convinced to download it. And unfortunately, it was actually leaving Game Pass. And for those who don't know, when a game is leaving Game Pass, they'll typically have a sale on the game. And it was on sale for, I think, $6 or something like that. So I said, why not? So I will be giving it a try. This week's episode, I will be convincing Darren to play Citizen Sleeper, which is a game by a single-person developer called Jump Over the Age.
Never heard of him. But I will be convincing Ryan to try the game Another Crab's Treasure by the development studio Aggro Crab. As far as I'm aware, they have done nothing else, but it's definitely not the game you expect it to be, unless that you knew anything about this game prior.
Before we get to those games, we're going to do a quick life check-in and update, and I actually have another funny story. A lot of my stories are going to come from my job as a librarian and an educator, and so, my story is about a metallic bee. So... I work at a school, and during holidays like teacher appreciation and before winter break and things like that, sometimes we'll get a few gifts. I got a lot of gift cards and things from people, and they'll sometimes include like little gifts. One year I got a little glass apple that I keep on my desk and kind of trinkets like that. And this year I got this metallic bee, probably like 6 inches in length, kind of like little coils for its antennas, clearly made out of metal. And so I have it displayed on my desk because I'm like, oh, that's a very nice gift. And during one of my lessons, actually after it had finished, the students were lining up to leave. And one of the students looks at me, dead in my face, dead serious. I could tell when students are trying to mess with me and when they're being dead serious. He goes, Mr. White, that's not a real bee. Like, almost like trying to get a point across to me about how this very clearly metallic bee is not an actual bee. And so I'm sitting there and I'm going, yeah, you're right. And he's like, no, it's not a real bee. Like, it's made of metal. Now, you may be thinking like, oh, like kindergarten, something like there. This was a second grader. And I wasn't sure how to respond because my initial thought when things like this, like the banana story, is they're messing with me. But he was so serious, and I've to this day, 9 years in education, I'm not 100% sure what to say there. Do I just go, yeah, you're right, and then just move on with my day, or do I try to like probe? I don't know, man. I'm still learning. But that story just kind of stood out to me because it's another one of those stories that just makes you go, huh?
Every week you become more and more resolute on my decision to stay far away from being an educator. I don't,
That's what
I
I
don't
do.
have that. That's part of why I don't have kids either. I don't have that. My natural, you know, God-given snark.
Oh my gosh, so
It's
much.
just it's too prevalent in those moments, and I mean, yeah, obviously, I'm not trying to create a core memory for a kid or anything, but
You would
man,
create so many. You
it's
would,
just so
you would.
many, and they wouldn't even know until like college.
When they start talking to a therapist, you mean?
Yeah, maybe. And I just, your strengths and weaknesses. That's not my strength, and we'll leave her there.
Fair enough.
Surprise twist of events. I did not have a funny story until yesterday.
Oh,
Um, and it's not so much funny. It's more of just a, people make you wonder. So I was wrapping up. I'm one of those people who works on Saturdays, unfortunately. Um, I get off at a reasonable hour. I get off at 4 p.m. People just minding their business. So I'm leaving the office and I go and I sit in my car. And as I'm walking to my car, there's a car just sitting in the parking lot with the engine running, which where I work is right next to a really good donut place. So it's not uncommon that someone runs in, grabs donuts, shout out Parlor Donuts, um, and leaves somebody in the car with it running. No big deal, or a dog. That's a big thing down here. But as I walk past the car, just at a quick glance, there's nobody sitting in the front seat. All right, that's a decision. Now, mind you, this is a pretty nice Mercedes SUV. Not the kind of car you just leave running anywhere, because where Ryan and I come from, if you leave your car running and it is a Mercedes SUV, you return to no car. That's just kind of how it goes. So I go and this car is parked like directly in front of me, and I like face to face. I'm going to put my stuff down in my car. I sit down and I look inside of this car, and there there you are, two grown adults in the back of this car, just getting after it.
no, 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 no,
This is a
no.
Now let's pause and reflect. So where the office is, a lot of transient residents, so a lot of snowbirds come down and are only in this town for 4 or 5 months in the cold months of like New England or the Midwest. Um, so a lot of old people. This is a
Tell
parking
me,
lot. This is a parking lot with a grocery store, which older people tend to do on weekends, as do most families. Um, and there's just
car rocking, rim shaking.
you know, just in the throes of passion in the back of the car, not like tucked away, like just in the middle of a parking aisle. And I mean, you get in where you fit in, sure.
Not even like midnight or like
If oh
late in the morning.
no, no,
Like,
this it's 4 p.m. on a Saturday.
oh my
Sun's
gosh.
out, parking lots popping, kids' sport teams are going and getting donuts after games. And there's just these two late middle-aged folk in a crowded parking lot in a Saturday, just 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 having a time.
That's a time.
And so nothing really makes you question what you're doing in life quite like having to witness that,
Well,
because you
that
just you
was.
just got to stop and it's like, okay, well, like, I don't want to stare, but as with all train wrecks, it's like,
I
man,
mean,
yeah, this is directly like I'm trying to turn my car on and there you are in my frame of view, just
the Titanic scene. You just saw a hand just right under that window.
I wish they were in the middle of the back seat. Like no askew from the front seats, like nothing. Just the car wasn't particularly tinted either, all things considered. So it's like, man, I, okay, I guess home was far.
I guess,
I
but
guess.
I
So
I
yeah.
I was gonna create a segue, but I'm gonna be honest. I don't know that I have one that would be appropriate to say.
Well, I
But
mean, if what segue do you need? You watch two people getting after it, and now we're gonna get after it, but in a completely different context.
there we
Cause like, why
go.
not, right? Now we're
Yes,
gonna now we got stuff to talk about. And by the way, for all of you listening, happy Super Bowl Sunday.
go birds.
For those watching on YouTube, you may have noticed there are two Eagles jerseys present. I would just like to clear the air for the record.
No, no, no air clearing.
Um,
Nope, no, not
this
not not,
is a
not
this is a
necessary.
Saquon Barkley jersey.
That's
You
all.
you'll note the hat is a Penn State hat. I did go there. I am a huge fan of Saquon. It's the only Giants jersey I'll ever own. This is the only Eagles jersey I'll ever own.
That's not true.
Unless
Jahan
they win the
Dotson.
Super Bowl, in which case, yeah, but if Dotson doesn't have himself a day, I probably won't buy that jersey. And I don't know if he'll even be on the team past next season. I don't want to buy multiple Dotson jerseys, so we'll see.
Fair
But
enough.
you know, I hope you guys are well, this will be long past the Super Bowl, but I hope retrospectively and retroactively you guys had a great Super Bowl Sunday, unless you joined the majority of America who thinks you don't want to watch the game just
Eh, I'm
just in
watching.
protest of the teams playing.
But moving on to gaming news, I do want to talk about this because there are some very interesting headlines. One of which is from just a day, yesterday, I believe it was, where PlayStation Network was down for basically a full day, and there has been no real explanation as to why, as far as I've seen. And it is now back up about 24 hours later, I believe, and the PlayStation has said they will be um, basically as an apology giving PS Plus users 5 days of adding on to the end of their current PS Plus membership. But I mean, down for a day, you get 5 days, sure. And it was reminiscent of the 2011 outage where PlayStation was down for. Do you remember how many days it was down for? Audience, do you recall that outage? If you were playing games at that time, it was down for so long. And it was initially started as Sony saying, oh, it'll be down for like a day, maybe two. Do you recall how long it went on for?
Was it 2 weeks?
Keep going.
Oh no. I was it 20? 20 days?
23 days.
God almighty.
The PlayStation Network was down. Now, I feel like it's not as big a deal as it is. Like, it was a big deal because I believe it was a hack. So basically, information was leaked and everything. As far as we know now, I don't think that's like the information has been leaked. But it's a bit bigger deal now because of the nature of being online. So there were a lot of games that people couldn't access. People were getting notifications of games that they had on disc that were in the console, and for whatever reason, because of the lack of access to a network, it couldn't read the disc, so they couldn't even play their disc games. And that is a problem. And I don't know if they're going to do anything about it, but it bothers me so much that I used to think that physical collection was better than digital because, one, I just like physical copies, but it also kind of created that barrier of, oh, you don't have to worry about if the internet goes down. Like, you have the disc. You can just play the disc. But seeing those notifications, I don't know. I don't know anymore, man.
Yeah, I mean, so what, 2011, we're talking late cycle PlayStation 3 still, I think, yeah?
PS3 came out in '06, so it would have been 5 years into its life. So yeah, pretty late.
So late cycle PS3, because what, PlayStation 4
PS4 was
was
20.
14?
Yes.
Okay. That
Yes.
that sounds right too. Feel free to correct us accordingly. Because I don't have the numbers in front of me. So infinitely less of a big deal then, right? But now in this time of everything games are streaming, game as a service is a huge model now. Any downtime is crazy, especially if that downtime is a Saturday. It's like great of you to give everybody 5 days, on the back end. But if those 5 days are a Monday through Friday, doesn't matter much for any working individual, right? Like I'm glad for that, but that's not 5 more days where I get to play. It's just five
Potentially, yeah.
more days
Well, I think
where I now have the service.
it's 5 days in addition to wherever your normal subscription would end. Like, I don't know how
Sure.
it's gonna work, but you're right. I
Eh,
think people get home after a long week and you just want to sit down and play whatever, and then you're just told no. Like, PS Plus games were down, and like it just everything was down, and that's rough. Even if it was only 24 hours, the nature of how widespread that outage hit like PlayStation gamers is it's just so big.
I mean, we you and I talked about this a little bit, so I'm bringing it up again. But I mean, once upon a time, I lived in a place where just the internet was terrible, and where the room was where my consoles were was about as far away from the modem and router as it could be. And so we're talking download speeds in the modern day. This would have been 2017, 2018. Modern day download speeds. I think I was getting like 10 megabits per second, like absolutely egregious, to the point where the Xbox One X, I think, no, Xbox One, just Xbox One that I had at the time, um, I could not play Assassin's Creed Origins at the time because the connection to the Ubisoft server could never be verified. And so even though again I was putting a disc in, I could not play a game that I had a physical copy for. And I think honestly this belies a much bigger issue with just how the gaming trend is, where now your ability to play games that you might even own outright, which again is probably a conversation for another entire episode. You cannot play the games at all if you don't have a reliable internet connection. While that's a bit more of a given now than it may have been, let's say, 15 years ago, it's still, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I don't know if this is going to be something that should potentially provoke, systemic change, or if this is just how it's going to be now and anybody who games needs to just accept it. But it's potentially a pretty big problem.
And this is just me thinking out loud, obviously, but I wonder if this will help the indie slash double A gaming scene, because I don't believe that a lot of indie games require constant internet connection. I feel like that, and I could very well be wrong. I'd have to do a bit more research, but I feel like the whole like must have internet, must always be connected to the internet thing is pretty strictly triple A, I think, like the big companies and everything. And so maybe this is an addition to that landscape of these indie games being able to kind of get a big foothold, which is what we want to do here, and pushing their IPs forward, moving them kind of forward in the zeitgeist of the gaming scene to get more attention, because you don't need a constant internet connection. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it's platform dependent. I know if you download something on Xbox, like if you purchase a digital version of a game, if you can't connect to the internet, it can't verify your license to play the game, and so you can't play it at all. I don't know if that is still the case for
Mm.
indie, but I imagine that if it has to have constant license validation, then even then you still wouldn't be able to play. Now, if indie games can figure out a workaround for that, I think that may only be the case for console. I'm not so certain about Steam, um, but you have to, be
Yeah.
able to use the Steam platform. So at that point, are we talking about Steam as an OS versus Steam as a service? We can't get too far off the rails here with that, but I mean, that's definitely stuff to think about. I hope this is not indicative of a problem that is going to become more commonplace, because
Speaking
that's crippling to the industry.
speaking of commonplace practices and crippling the industry, from TheVerge.com, BioWare has lost over 2 dozen staff as they shift focus to Mass Effect, leaving them with a team of less than 100. And I want to extend that headline a bit, because there was something else that's in conjunction with EA, because EA just, they got to keep catching those L's, baby. But the EA CEO also made a statement that hurt me to my core, because it is one of the most tone deaf things I think a CEO of a company has said in a long, long time. The EA CEO said Veilguard, Dragon Age Veilguard, which is made by Bioware, EA, it would have performed better if it had live service elements. Now, for those who don't know, live service elements are essentially basically the game is a live service game where they're constantly adding updates and new patches, and honestly a lot of the time it bleeds into microtransactions. I don't know if I can think of a live service game that's not microtransactions. I think that's the purpose of a live service game, is to kind of steadily, instead of releasing a game every year or whatever, they can put out small updates, and if done correctly it can work really well. So far Marvel Rivals has been putting out updates pretty frequently, and it's going well. You can pay money if you want to, but you don't have to get full enjoyment of the game. And I feel like Marvel Rivals is live service done well. And I feel like Veilguard, as a single player RPG, does not have a place for live service, and I really hope the industry is not headed in that direction with live service, because I thought we learned our lesson with so many games that have come and gone.
Oh God, just Battlefront. It's Battlefront all over again, right? I mean, it's for what? For what possible reason? I mean, now if we're talking about performance from a financial perspective, okay, sure. If these are paid updates, that's one thing. If these are just reasons to try to keep people engaged and continue playing the game, that's different still. But if it really is just a means of trying to forcibly inject microtransactions into a game, into a single player game that has, I mean, what are you gonna do? What possible thing could you use to try to make it a game as a service type of thing?
If it
My
has
issue with it, games as a service makes me angry because that means at any point they just decide to cease the service and the game no longer exists as a media.
True, and but I don't think there are certain games that just it doesn't work. Live service, I feel like, really is only going to work well if you're doing it with a multiplayer game. I don't feel, and there's no multiplayer in Veilguard. So what,
No.
like, would they be squeezing in multiplayer? Because I remember Mass Effect 3 had a multiplayer mode that I played like once, because I don't play Mass Effect for the co-op or the multiplayer,
Hmm.
and I feel like it's just so far off the mark. And now they're instead of making a game that people are gonna play, like FromSoft with Elden Ring, which is a single player game that has multiplayer elements with the ghosts and everything, but it is really a single player game that has a community that kind of help each other out, but there's zero microtransactions, and that game has such good retention because it's just a good game. That's all you need to make. That's
And I
it.
mean, I imagine that we get caught up in looking at games like Fortnite, and how the original Destiny performed as far as games as a service. But then you have to look at the other end of that. Look at
Anthem.
any headline that has existed. Well, Anthem, here it goes again. But look at any headline that has surrounded Destiny 2 in the last 5 years. Like that community has been so up in arms so many times, and the difference is the community can get stuff done. But
Yeah,
it's a statement that you don't know what you're asking for in trying to say that a game like that should be a game as a service. I have a pretty long and sordid history with mobile gaming over the
yeah, you
last
do.
decade,
Yeah, you do.
which is the your ultimate example of games as a service, to try to drive it as an economic model. And it's great for the longevity of the game until the exact point that it's not. And if it becomes the trend in the gaming community that you can put thousands of hours potentially into a game that just one day no longer exists and you can't play at all anymore.
And the other issue to that is that you don't get anything to show for it. That's like
Mm-hmm.
that's the inherent issue with game as a service, is that you could dedicate so much money, time, all of that to a game, and the moment it dies, you don't get anything for it.
But the real
Like,
treasure was the friends you made along the way,
which
remember?
you genuinely did.
It's true.
Darren and I played Final Fantasy 14, and through that we met somebody that we talked to every week. Played Dungeons and Dragons with him every week, and so there are definitely things to be made from that. But the inherent thing about games as a service is that you are putting money into something, time into something that if it goes down, you have nothing to show for it. But if that ties into a potential greater issue, obviously we have zero inside connection, but that lies into a potential issue with BioWare as a whole, is that why are you downsizing so much? I looked up, and this might be a wrong number, but I don't know that it is. I looked up the original developer count, like how many people worked on the original Mass Effect, and it was 130. The original Mass Effect. I'm sure it grew over the next couple iterations, but now they're operating at less than 100. That's what is that going to look like for this game that people are already like cautious about approaching as it is, based on Andromeda, which didn't do that well and was not well loved at all.
No. I I guess it ultimately is going to depend. When did the next Mass Effect game begin its development? Did they actually tell us the right date? I mean, if you're not trying to run your team into the ground, as long as you give yourself enough time to work on it, then you can still make a good game with a small staff. I mean, No Man's Sky is the perfect example of that.
Poor
It's
launch, horrible launch, but
but they fixed
listen to
it.
feedback, and now it's really awesome and genuinely doesn't look like the same game.
No,
That's a good
I
game as a service.
exactly. But I mean, with Mass Effect, I mean, I put it on my list of favorite franchises of games last week, and with good reason. I truly do enjoy Mass Effect as a series, but we have to exclude Andromeda because it was just such a mess. It has no place that it looks like it fits in, and now we're cutting back on numbers. I mean, at this point, are we just publishing a Mass Effect game to say that we did it, and then put our hands up in the air and say, "Oh, well, I guess that's a dead IP. Let's move on." I just in this time too, where at the Game Awards, we got a new space exploration game from Naughty Dog announcement that generated more hype in that small debut cinematic trailer than the Mass Effect series has had for the better part of a decade.
Yeah,
This is not the time to pull punches if
yeah.
we want the product to be anything worth talking about when we know things coming down the pipeline. You just watched a game development company like Bethesda absolutely flounder with this exact same rough concept as a game in
we,
Starfield.
we could dedicate a whole episode to Starfield. Let me tell
Why are
you,
we pulling development from it? I can't
that's a whole other can of
make it
worms, man.
make it make sense because it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
That I just like, do
That
you
that
think you just have a crowd of people waiting outside Bioware Studios like little baby birds going me, give me Mass
well,
Effect? Like, no, nobody's doing that.
that connects back to CD Projekt Red with Cyberpunk, and a company that had garnered nothing but positive feedback, love from the community. People loved CD Projekt Red because of the Witcher series. For those who don't know, they made The Witcher, and Witcher 3 garnered so much praise, and overnight with Cyberpunk's release, it was gone with one release. And so it's very fragile to keep customers, because if before Cyberpunk, if you had told anybody like, "Hey, this is the developers of The Witcher," most of them would have said, "I'm in. I don't even need to see trailers. I'm buying it. I'm in." A lot of people would have said that, and then one game, all that goodwill is vanished. It is gone off the face of the earth. So it's fragile, man.
Side note,
And
if you all
oh,
have played Cyberpunk and you haven't gone back and played Cyberpunk since they've done all of their updates, please do that.
I haven't really
Please.
touched it since like Phantom Liberty and things like that, but I've heard it's much better. Speaking of anticipated releases, Dual Shockers has reported that Pokemon Legends is still slated for 2025. Do we get a Switch 2 launch title?
Oh man. Um God, can you imagine the Switch launching with a new Pokemon game?
I, I'm
That'd be
just saying
crazy. Have we ever had a Nintendo console launch with a new Pokemon game?
that would be a question for you to answer, because I just
Oh
get
God.
Pokemon games and I play them.
I don't. I
I
don't
want to
think
say no to
so.
be honest, but I don't
I
know.
don't think so.
So for those who don't know what Pokemon Legends is, Pokemon Legends is a mainline. No, it's more a
Mm-mm.
spin-off of Pokemon that kind of turns it into more open world, still turn-based, but it's a lot more interactive. It's kind of like a perfect marriage of Pokemon Go and mainline Pokemon games where
And
you
also
walk
Monster Hunter.
and Monster Hunter, you walk around with your trainer in the overworld, and you actual launch your Pokeball at Pokemon to catch them off guard. You can throw your Pokemon out to start a battle in real time, so it's not really random encounter per se. And yeah, it's just a very fresh take on the Pokemon formula. And I think Arceus, which was the first one, was I thought it was super fun and a very nice take on the Pokemon formula. So the sequel,
Actually, it's Arceus.
uh,
Thank
I
you.
are you? Is it
And
really?
second, it really is.
Okay,
Um,
fair enough.
yeah, it's
Okay,
for what
so
it's worth.
Pokemon
Um,
resident Pokemon
yes.
Master.
Yeah. Okay.
What is Z to A? Is that how it's gonna be?
We've never had anybody officially say it for us, so I mean, sure, that sounds good. Um, yeah. So it takes place in the same region as X and Y, which
Okay.
which to me, and I'm on record saying this to friends, but now I'm gonna go on record and saying this publicly. I truly believe that Pokemon X and Y, so Generation 6, saved the franchise because
What
it
console
just
did that
brought
release on?
so much. That was the DS,
Okay,
3DS, DS, 3DS.
it
One
might
of
be
those two.
3DS.
Those the consoles themselves blend together in my mind. I do believe it was the
Fair,
3DS.
fair.
Um, but that it saved the franchise. That's where we got our first new typing since Generation 2. It's where we got megas. It was the best. Oh, people are gonna come for me for this one. I think it was one of the better stories of a Pokemon game, and I think the setting was incredible. It was a region based in France, or based around France, I guess. Um, it was a very complete region with a very compelling story, characters that you didn't outright hate. Uh, Good game, very very good game. I put 200 hours or something into a single playthrough of Pokemon X,
Nice.
but I also did some competitive stuff back then.
So
And
yeah,
so now to revisit that setting in effectively a different time period, that's going to be incredible. I look forward to seeing what they do with it. I mean, there's a ton of leaks online. Take your pick on whether or not you think those are real. I choose to try to stay as ignorant of leaks as I can. I'm a sucker for an official announcement. Those get me more hype than a leak will because I don't want to get my hopes up. If we do still see that title this year, Pokemon loves holiday adjacent releases. So we
mm,
get a decent number of Pokemon games in like that August to October window. It's great for driving console sales up. Now, if we look at this from a macro gaming perspective, however, the later into the year you go, the more you now risk launching a very anticipated title against Grand Theft Auto 6.
yeah, yeah, you do.
So, from an industry perspective, is that a good idea? I think they want to maintain that it's plausible. I mean, who knows? If that's still a strong rumor, it's possible that we get a solid Pokemon announcement on Pokemon Day, which I believe is this month. Um, so we'll see. But I personally am very excited for that. I don't think it is going to be released in conjunction with Switch 2, but I do believe it will be a launch title for Switch 2, just as part of an existing library of upscaled games.
I
I believe they have said that it is not being developed for the Switch 2 solo, but it will be on. I can't imagine it won't be. Switch 2 has backwards compatibility anyway, so I mean, why not?
if this was a few years ago, I would say if there was an industry juggernaut that I mean, nothing is going to compete with GTA 6, but if there was a game that like could potentially maybe stand head to head, it would have been Pokemon a couple generations ago, but I feel like a lot of goodwill was lost with their most recent release. But we'll see. We'll see how that
Yeah.
goes. And one thing that stands out to me, I don't know that I would put this game in there with our question. Our question of the week is, what is the Mount Rushmore? What is your Mount Rushmore for gaming soundtracks? So for those who don't get what that question means, like, what are your top four gaming soundtracks of all time for you personally? And I would say for nostalgia purposes, I could potentially put Pokemon on there. But if I were to speak for myself objectively, not let nostalgia get in the way, although that's hard to do, I think I have my four. But before we continue, let's come to an agreement. Do we want to do individual games or game series as a whole? Because that completely changes this question.
I think we have to do individual games. You can't necessarily compare for the sake of series because there's some, I mean, Final Fantasy as a series has incredible music. That's not fair. That's simply, you're gonna strike gold when you have 30 songs in a game and you've released 20 something titles. So
Yeah.
individual games, we'll keep it there.
Okay.
Okay, go.
We have a Reddit. I posted this question on the Reddit. I also plan on posting it on any other platforms that kind of allow for it. But for me, my four Mount Rushmore gaming soundtracks: Kingdom Hearts 2. It's hard for me to beat Nobuo Uematsu, man. Or no, that's Yoko Shimomura. Yoko Shimomura killed it with the Kingdom Hearts soundtrack. And after that, I have a recent entry that really stood out to me and really shocked me. And the music has been stuck in my head since I finished it a couple of weeks ago. I think it's been 3 weeks ago at this point. Is Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade has one of the most fantastic soundtracks I have ever heard in my life. And lo and behold, the composer for the Nier series had a hand in it. Nier, for those who don't know, has also incredible soundtracks, but something about Stellar Blades was just amazing. Then I would put in Donkey Kong Country 2. Donkey Kong Country 2 has some of the soundtracks, some songs that will stick with me, and I don't care how old I'll get. It will take me right back to childhood, but even barring nostalgia, just genuinely impressive music with what was capable on the Super Nintendo. And lastly, this one might be weird because it's not an original soundtrack, but it is a soundtrack. And for me, my fourth is Fallout 3. Fallout 3's radio songs are so good and introduced me to that 1920s, 30s, 40s sound. And there's something about the quality of the music, and I don't mean like the how well a song is written. I just mean like the actual audio quality of those songs. There's just something about that vibe from that time period that really sticks out to me. And the songs, I don't want to set the world on fire with the ink spots, Cole Porter. It's just so good and fits the mood of Fallout 3 so well. And so those are my top four from my Mount Rushmore. Feel free to argue with me, critique me, whatever, but I don't think I could change my mind on those.
Yep, and that's reasonable. I don't. There's not much to argue with. I mean, the the soundtrack of a game is, especially for the two of us. We've talked about this for almost 20 years now. The soundtracks of a game are part of what gives the game its lasting power. Because while we can remember moments, I can remember moments from, movies and books I've read and everything. But there's something to be said about music's ability to evoke very specific emotional responses that you can't compare to simple events happening.
We are two people who, back in high school, maybe early years of college, we saw Final Fantasy in concert, and it was
Mm-hmm.
magical,
At the Distant
magical.
Worlds, Distant Worlds, for those of you unfamiliar, where they just orchestrated famous songs from the Final Fantasy series. I believe up till that point only
12
no,
or
I do
13?
believe for the original launch of 14 had been out. Not A Realm
Okay.
Reborn yet, but the original launch.
Possibly. Yeah.
But we definitely had 13. 13 was not a part of the show, however.
No. But
Again, yes, that
Tazanarkin
was
was, Aerith's theme was, and Sephiroth's theme was, and I'm never gonna forget that experience. But
and
yes,
Terra's theme.
don't want to ramble.
Mm.
Darren,
Yes,
what
okay.
is your Mount Rushmore?
So for me, there are two games ever where I have purchased physical copies of the
Mm.
soundtrack. Now,
Oh man,
when
I'm
I say
think
physical,
I
there's
know.
one is physical, one I actually purchased on iTunes back in the day. But there are only two, and those two will be on this list. The
I
first
know one of
soundtrack
them
I ever
easily.
purchased, the first soundtrack I ever purchased for a video game long ago was Final Fantasy X.
Okay.
Final Fantasy X to me is one of the most complete soundtracks that even just from a tonic and melodic quality goes along with the progression of the story. It's really quite incredible. The second game that I have a physical copy, 4 discs of this soundtrack, is Skyrim.
Yeah.
Skyrim is still to this day my barometer of how much do I like the music. It's like on a scale of, I don't know, Super Mario on the Game Boy
Hmm.
to Skyrim. Skyrim is so good. Jeremy Soule outdid himself in every contrivable way with that game to me. Now, the other two are definitely a little more interchangeable for
Mm-hmm.
me because I probably have 3 games that I could put here, with a fourth being again for nostalgia. Pokemon Red and Blue will always at least get an honorable mention for me just because of how iconic every bit of that glorious Game Boy sound comes through. But that's not on my list, unfortunately. For me, number 3 would be Near Automata.
Mm-hmm.
Just an absolute masterclass. If you
Yes.
if you've never listened to Become as Gods, it will make you want to run through a wall at full speed, and you will truly believe that you're going to get through that wall at full speed. It's fantastic. Um, and lastly, again for me, a bit of a newer entry. I really and truly loved the radio music from Cyberpunk.
Oh,
I think
okay.
it gave you so much diversity in like what you could listen to. You could make it fit the mood of whatever you were playing. There in updates they went and put some of the radio songs into scenes of the game. So if any of you have played the newer update, when you have a partner in the game and they come and stay at your house, the quest name is called "I Really Want to Stay at Your House," which is the name of the song that plays on the radio. It's fantastic. Did you even get a weird and kind of awkward little scene where you dance with the person in your like living room area? It's great, and the song that plays is incredible. There's just there's so much variety to it that you can't possibly overlook a game that was willing to contract artists to make and perform songs for the game, and they were all absolutely incredible, including some like relevant artists who escape me at the moment, but whoever was the voice of the character Lizzie Wizzy in the game is actually relevant musically.
Hmm.
And her contributions to the game were fantastic too. I mean, just the whole soundtrack of that game is phenomenal. It still sticks with me to this day, to the point where I actually was just driving about a couple hours ago, and a song from that soundtrack came on my Spotify. It's fantastic.
Nice. That so I yeah, I am definitely a sucker for a good futuristic cyberpunk style soundtrack for sure. Like one song that stands out to me is the map music from Mass Effect. I cannot remember if it's one or two, but I think it was one where it had that like synth that was just going, and then it had that high pitched whistle that happened. Like I'm a sucker for good futuristic
Mm,
music, which is actually why I really am excited to talk about my game that I'm convincing you to play this week because it is a futuristic style game and the music from it matches that vibe and it's really, really good. And so I do want to talk about that because that was a perfect segue into my game of the week, which is Citizen Sleeper by Jump Over the Age. It is a single person developer that he just released a sequel, Citizen Sleeper 2, that is also available on Game Pass. But I played the first one. And before I dig into the highlights of it, Darren, I have a question for you. Audience, I have a question for you. When you were in elementary school, middle school, were you a fan of choose your own adventure books?
So, fun fact with those, I've never read a single one. I didn't even have the concept of those introduced to me until I moved to Maryland in 5th grade, and they were only referenced in passing. It was never something that was done as a class. It was never something that I picked up and read. So I have never, though I will reference them in terms of like alluding or for metaphorical reasons, I have never at any point read one of those books.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Do you like the idea of your actions having an impact on the story?
So you know the answer to that question. I do, but you know what that does to me as an individual, and it absolutely gives me analysis paralysis because I always want to make the right decision.
What would you say if there was no right decision? So, for example, when you're
Oh
playing
God,
Witcher 3, you can have an impact on the ending, but there's no right or wrong, really. It is just whatever you feel is right in that moment. There's no true right or wrong. If you could look up a guide and there's no, like, this is the ideal way to play, it's just, these are your options. This is what happens. It's your choice. The world is your sandbox to truly impact how you see fit.
I say that sounds like a liminal hell.
We're off to a fantastic start.
But it's an
So,
interesting concept. Continue.
Citizen Sleeper is a it is inspired by tabletop role-playing games and it takes the RP part of RPG, which stands for role-playing, and cranks it up to the extreme. It is kind of a video game choose your own adventure. Like there isn't really combat. There isn't really it's not your typical RPG where it's like man with big gun, big sword, shoot people, get strong. Like it's not that. It is just a well written kind of not visual novel, but kind of visual novel where you are a what's called a sleeper, and you were kind of shot into space by this company. I believe it's S1E2 is the name of the company, and they essentially create these androids in a sense, but they build in planned obsolescence to these robots, and they have this proprietary medicine that will stop these sleepers from dying. So if a sleeper leaves, they're kind of stuck because you can't get this proprietary medicine that can help you. And you play as one of these sleepers who leaves the company and lands on this giant spaceship called the Eye. And your goal is really just to survive and get off the Eye to kind of go have a better life. So I got about 4 or 5 hours in, and I looked up on how long to beat, and it says that with main story, there isn't really a place to do extras because every choice you make is like moving it forward. And the game itself is about 7 hours long. It's not crazy long. And the way it works is that every day, called a cycle, you get a certain amount of dice. It's RNG dice that are rolled, and you have to keep up your energy by eating food and your condition by getting the medicine so that your proprietary obsolescence doesn't activate. And you make choices to kind of build up your money build up your skills when you complete objectives and things like that. And the lower your energy and condition, the less actions you can do per day. So I believe the max was 6 per day. And what you do is you go and you can like work on a spaceship, and that fills a separate meter that builds you towards a goal. And the dice that you rolled at the beginning of every day kind of determines how likely you are to succeed at this thing. So I believe it can go from 1 to 6. 6 being like, yeah, you're gonna succeed, like extra succeed. In D&D terms, it would be a critical success. You can regular succeed, and then you can fail. When you fail, it will either knock your energy down, or it can build up this other meter to like a possible negative result that may happen. And so everything you do every day is determined by this dice roll that will say whether you succeed, and you're building towards objectives that unlock other objectives that can then push the story forward. And so that's kind of the general gameplay loop. Is you rest, you get dice at the beginning of the day, and then you use those dice to move the story forward. And even when you fail an objective, the game's not over. It just alters the outcome of where the game can go. So that is, it was kind of hard to grasp at first, but once I started playing, I really understood it. So, for example, you have a tracker built in, and like this is pretty much at the beginning of the game. When you go to your room, there's a counter that basically says something is after you. You don't know what, and your job is to get the tracker removed. I didn't do that in time. I wasn't sure how to do it, to be completely honest, because I wasn't sure where I should go. I was also focused on other objectives. So the negative timer built up, and then it unlocked this interaction with this bounty hunter that I then convinced, or he kind of let me, to let me kind of live out my life. But the caveat was that I had to essentially every few cycles, I had to meet him at this bar and pay for his tab. I could have also tried to run, but I was like, yo, I don't want to risk this dude shooting me and getting a game over or being crippled anyways. So I was like, you know what? Fine. I'll meet you at this bar. And so days pass. I go to this bar, and his response is like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're actually here and you did this. And so this whole interaction happens, and as far as I'm aware, granted, only the first time I've played it, if I had gotten the tracker removed, this whole interaction, I don't think it would have happened. But I let it happen because I was focused on other stuff, and then it unlocked this whole other thing. So this is one of those games where I don't really have choice paralysis, because I don't get that when I know that every single thing I'm doing is moving towards something else. It's not leading towards a game over necessarily. It's not leading towards a bad thing. It's just leading towards a completely different outcome. And that is how the game works. And so a short game that's 7 hours long, like you can put time into a 7-hour game to get completely different outcomes, completely different stories. And you could probably play this game and tell me things that I never had, or vice versa, or handled things differently. Like there's this one story that kind of ripped my heart out, because this game is really, really written well, about this dad and his daughter who were trying to get off. And so you have the option, there is a way to get off this space station if you become like a worker on a ship. And to become that worker, you have to work shifts to kind of enter a lottery to get your name called to get on the ship. And you have the option of essentially watching this guy's daughter while he goes to work to hopefully get a chance to get on the ship. I could have just said no, and after a few cycles, that time passes, this dude ain't getting on that ship no matter what. But I took it upon myself because I was like, yo, I feel bad. I got to help this guy out. So I watched his daughter at my expense, so that way he could potentially get that lottery to go on the ship. So it's stuff like that. There's no right or wrong, because Do you look out for yourself, or do you look out for these people that you just met for the first time? I don't know. There's no wrong answer. And that is Citizen Sleeper. I would recommend it for anybody who likes story, like very narrative, story driven visual novel games. And that's just me.
Is it voice acted?
It is not. So you will be doing reading. I want to
Or
say there's not,
making
because
voices
like I
in my
said,
head?
it's a single developer game, right? I don't know about like music and stuff like that, but I know that Jump Over the Age is a single developer, and I can't imagine how much of a budget it would have added for him to voice that, because it's tons of dialogue. There's tons and tons of writing in this game. So I can't imagine for a single developer that he would have just had the funds to like throw at this game. There might be in Citizen Sleeper 2, but I don't know. I haven't played it yet.
Fair enough. You were going to mention something about the music.
Yes, the music is very sci-fi futuristic, but it's really, really done well. And it's the kind of music that for me personally, after I'm finished with it, I will be searching out the soundtrack for certain times. Like if I need like music to focus or music to kind of just decompress, like it has that kind of music. If you can recall the overworld music from Mass Effect 1, this game has like a similar vibe to that soundtrack.
All right.
So we
It's
will
an
talk.
interesting idea.
It is. It genuinely is, and it's refreshing to have a game that like, okay, I'm dumb. So for those listening, I'm not smart when it comes to like, perfect example, like if I play Elden Ring, I'm not connected. I'm not reading an item description and being like, yo, this god is connected to this demigod to this dude. Like I'm not making those connections. Like when it comes to games where there's like environmental storytelling, I don't make those critical thinking connections. I am so concrete with what I need, which is why I like JRPGs, because they tend to over explain. But this game has such good flowery writing that even I was able to really grasp like the concepts of what the writing was trying to get across, even with its flowery language. I'm an elementary school librarian for a reason. When I go get books from Barnes and Noble, I'm in the kids fantasy section. I don't go to the young adult section. I don't go to the adult fantasy section. I stick with kids fantasy because it's straightforward for me. That's how my brain works, and this game, with its flowery language, I was able to grasp it. So yeah, I don't let like flowery language dissuade you. It's genuinely really well written and entertaining.
I like flowery language.
I know you do because you use it with your SAT
I do.
words.
I do.
But yes,
So
so
it's
that is
definitely
Citizen.
interesting. I will consider that one significantly. Um, Game developers, if you're listening, it's been a while since we've had a good peripheral. The only peripheral I need is for somebody to let me roll physical dice instead of RNG dice,
That'd be so good.
because that is my least favorite thing. Ryan well knows my the duality of my luck with a physical dice versus a virtual dice.
It's not great.
It's terrible. And I suppose that balance, but if I could roll real dice
You're in.
instead of not real dice
Like playing Baldur's Gate 3, just have some real
with a
dice to
real
roll.
D20, please, please.
Yeah, that'd be
That's
so
all.
cool. That'd be so cool. But yes,
So
that
other
is
than that,
Citizen Sleeper. Um, we could talk more if you will genuinely consider it, and I'll tell you if I actually believe you should play it. But moving on to another Crabs Treasure, which is kind of like the polar opposite of the game that I just described, I think.
So Ryan, how how do you feel about pollution in our world's oceans?
Oh, terrible.
Mm,
Dreadful. Shouldn't happen. Save the turtles.
mm, very politically correct answer of you. What if I told you that the fish were creating colonies with our trash, and microplastics was a currency? How would that make you feel?
Then I say throw it all in the ocean, baby. Let's buff up their economy. That's what I say.
Clip that. Um, so another crab's treasure. It's a Souls-like, where you are krill and you are hermit crab, and your shell is stolen by a loan shark, which is a shark. It's actually one of those like reach and grabby toys that you play with as a kid. That's just little shark's mouth. It's amazing. Um, and you end up on this grand journey to get your shell back. Your microplastics are your currency. They're basically the equivalent of souls,
Mm,
or echoes from Elden Ring, or blood tinge, or whatever it was in Bloodborne. Which you use to buy things, you use to level when you unlock leveling. If I told you that there was a mana meter and a power system in this game, similar to, again, your mana bar in Elden Ring, what would you think it would be called in this game about crabs, Ryan?
Crabometer.
It's MSG. There you go. In this world where the roads in towns are made of pharmacy receipts that just span for miles, to cardboard castles and houses, to the fact that your weapon is a fish fork. This game is really quite charming, just full of nautical and sea related puns, which really, really serve to kind of cut into the overall mood of the game. It's a
Mm,
very self aware game.
I like
For
it.
as punishingly difficult as it is, for as maybe a little unpolished as the combat is compared to a FromSoft, which has really got it figured out to a science. If you're expecting that degree of polish, you're not going to get it quite, but it's good enough. The power ups feel good. The combat feels good. It is hard. It is a hard game.
Mm.
Definitely more forgiving with where your spawn points are, especially around bosses. For example, if I were to tell you there was a dogfish covered in moss, what would you call it? If you said lycanthrope, you're right, because moss is lichen. See, that's what we're talking about here. That's the kind of game that'll really get you invested in
That
the world that you're in. That's
that almost makes me
brilliant, by the
angry.
way. Brilliant. I looked at Haley yesterday when I was playing, because I played this game. I probably put 15 hours into this game that I really didn't have. And I looked at Haley when the lycanthrope came on, and I said, "Did I write this?" Because I love a good pun more than most things. If I can sufficiently ruin your day with a joke
You've
that
done
makes
so
you
many
grab your
times.
face, I'm gonna do it.
So
This
many times.
game, this game just makes you so happy, and I don't want to necessarily spoil it for you, but like plays on things like Uncrustables,
I
or
love
crushed
Uncrustables.
cans of Pabst Blue Ribbon, called physically based rendering because it's PBR. It's so good. It's so good and so aware. And then on top of its self awareness is a good Souls game in a setting that is a bit more lighthearted, but also has conversations about, like, well, it's trash day. A bunch of trash just got dumped onto the city. People are trying to collect the trash in order to get the microplastics because it makes them money. It's almost a PSA mixed with a Souls born game that also is lighthearted and funny in terms of how it delivers the puns that it does. this game honestly deserves so much more attention than it's getting. And I mean, I know the Game Grumps played an episode of it, which just for anyone watching, like Ryan and I have been fans of the Game Grumps since JonTron. Um, it's I wish there was more people talking about it. If
I
you at
think
any point, if you want a game that is hard, that rewards you for getting good at it, not necessarily as hard as like Demon Souls, but hard. If you want that and you are somebody who enjoys that type of gameplay, then please, please play this game. You will not regret it unless you absolutely hate puns or have such a severe shellfish allergy that even just watching them on a game makes you light up. Like those, that's the only two. Everybody should be playing this game in some way. It is worth it.
fair
Aggro,
enough.
I hope you do more.
Yeah, I
Give me a Freddy Fish third person shooter
bro,
made by Aggro, made
Freddy
by Aggro
Fish
Crab.
3, the Freddy Fissioning. Let's go.
Oh man,
Although there's
the
a billion
refrying.
Freddy Fishes.
That's fine. Give me Freddy Fish Fry 44 or whatever. Like let's just give it to me.
Freddy Fish
Give
2
me something.
Judgment Day.
Give me something cool
Um
because it's they deserve much more credit for
uh
making this.
frame rate, music, what are we looking at?
So music pretty good. Um, Nothing that necessarily stands out. Like you're not gonna get your big like bellowing speaking in Latin choruses for boss fights that let you
Shame.
know what's about to happen. However, still a very good soundtrack. It's thematically appropriate for wherever you're at. There are definitely times where I'd stop and kind of bop my head a little bit, like, all right. Frame rate and camera definitely can be an issue.
Okay.
Um, I'm not going to sit here and say that the game is perfect. It's certainly not perfect. It feels like it is worlds apart from a FromSoft developed Souls like, but that in no way takes away from the game.
No, that's
Even if the camera does result in some deaths, because it's going to. Like I'm not going to sit here and pretend that you don't end up down in a ravine and your camera shoots in real high while you're surrounded by three things. I mean, you were probably going to die anyway, but
FromSoft has
it's
had
definitely
decades to hone their craft. So
yeah.
yeah, obviously you're not going to compare like a FromSoft game. For those who don't know,
No.
FromSoft, Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Elden Ring, Armored Core, stuff like that. That's them. But I don't. Yeah, you're not going to compare FromSoft to really any other Souls like because it's their thing. So I get it,
Mhm.
but still, to even be mentioned in the same breath as them, I'm sure they'd love that.
It's honestly a really good point of entry for anyone who's wanted to look into Soulsborne type games. You're only managing four stats. Your
Okay.
equipment load is purely based on whatever you find to use as a shell in the interim. So, I mean, we're talking anything from a banana peel to a shot glass to a soda can to uh, a used K pod. Like, and every shell that you get has an ability attached to it, which is your MSG ability that does something for you. So lets you attack an AoE, or gives you a healing over time effect, or an attack buff at the expense of something else. I mean, it's a really well put together, very complete system without a lot of statistical micromanaging that you might expect
Sure.
from a Demon Souls or an Elden Ring.
Nice.
So if you've
I
never played a game like that, this is a phenomenal point of entry into a very punishingly difficult genre.
You know what?
And
Fair
it's
enough.
funny. And
It,
it's so
I
funny.
love it so far. I love the main
It's
character. I haven't
so
even played a
funny.
single second of this game.
Oh, Krill is adorable, but just if the game is it's funny. I do recommend reading the stuff around you though. I was in a town the other day and I found the S from the 90s. And if you know the S from the 90s,
Super S.
all over boxes in that town. Incredible.
Nice.
There's a
All
pawn
right.
shop run by a prawn. Do you know what it's called? It's called Prawn Shop. Enjoy that. Where he just stuck the R underneath the A in pawn to make it the prawn shop. Incredible.
So with all that said,
7.5 out of 10 stars. Go play.
I will absolutely be checking that out. And now that we've reached the end of the convincing segment, were you unironically praising this game, or was there a little bit of exaggeration for those who are listening in?
No, no. This game's so much fun.
I
I
I
found myself. I've picked up my game for next week because I just have very little time this week. So I've already picked up my game for next week and found myself somewhat sad that I was not actively playing another Crab's Treasure, which is
fair enough.
wild.
Fair enough. I also wasn't exaggerating. I think there's definitely a place for a story-driven RPG like game. I forgot to mention that you can level up stats to increase your likelihood of succeeding, which is where kind of like that the role playing also comes into play. But no, I wasn't exaggerating either. The music's really good. I would recommend anybody who's looking for kind of like a less intense version of Disco Elysium. Because I went into Disco Elysium expecting something completely different, and it wasn't there, and I got turned off because it wasn't what I was expecting. Not to say that it's not good, but Citizen Sleeper does have a time and place. With that said, I would like to talk about, since you mentioned your next game that you're already playing.
Mhm.
What is the next game that you're going to be talking about?
Sure. So the next game that I will be convincing about is the Dungeons of Hinterberg by Microbird Games, which I honestly have known nothing about prior to playing.
Sure. Is it? Do you know if it's RPG, open world adventure? Like the only remembrance I have of that is when it was like announced at the Game Awards a couple years ago. But like I didn't really look into it past that. Have you looked
I
into
do
it at all?
know because I've started playing it,
Oh yeah, you
so I
did.
know
So
exactly what kind of game it is.
see, once
It
again, thumb.
is it is a light action RPG.
Oh sweet. Okay. Okay. If we'll talk more about it. My game is Neon White by Angel Matrix and published by Annapurna. I specify that because Angel Matrix has, as far as when I looked it up, Neon White was the only thing they had made. But Annapurna, for those who don't know, is the same company that published Stray, Outer Wilds, What Remains of Edith Finch, and Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is a game I want to play, but it's not on Game Pass or PS Plus as far as I'm aware. And it's another puzzle game. But Neon White is a first-person shooter puzzle platformer. So I am very
So it's
excited to
Portal.
see. Uh, I don't know. I just know the cover art because I see it on Game Pass all the time. So I just know that there are like masks or something involved. I don't think that know mechanically if they have anything to do with it, but I'm very excited to try it. So those are the games we will be playing on the docket going forward. There is a release that Darren and I are very excited about. It is Avowed, and we have purposely not really dug into it because the only thing that we've seen and heard about it so far is that it is a very, very potentially another Skyrim, and that is all we've needed to hear. The only thing I really know about it is that it's set in the same world as Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2, which is a CRPG that came out years ago. That was very fun. I played most of Pillars of Eternity 1, kind of touched Pillars of Eternity 2, but same world, and I am very excited to try it out. And that will be its own episode. Like we plan on doing like specials for big releases, like AA, AAA releases that we're really excited about that we both want to play. And so that will be its own episode with a different format where we really dive deep into it, but it won't be until after we've really, really played it. So don't know when that's going to be, but that is coming up soon. Please continue sending feedback, suggestions, anything you want to hear. And thank you for listening. Our socials are on the screen. You can find us on Spotify at Convince Me Gaming. You can find us on Reddit at Convince Me Podcast. You can find us at YouTube and Instagram at Convince Me Media. And the Discord link is on the screen if you'd like to join us in chat. And please subscribe, leave reviews, and follow us, I guess. That's all I have.
Yeah. As always, it's we can't thank those of you who are listening enough. Um, if you're actually joining us and you're in the future and this is far in the past, hello from the past. Um,
It's always going to be in the past, though.
that's true. But I mean far in the past, a year from now. If
Fair
you
enough.
just heard about us and we have the year's worth of episodes up and you're strumming on through our early days, please know this is the beginning. We will learn and find more new things. But we're definitely grateful for anybody who takes the time to listen to two just ludicrously neurodivergent ADHD individuals ramble on about the games that we enjoy. Um, because we would probably bore our spouses into leaving us if they had to listen to this. So it's awesome
Can't believe she's still
that you
here.
have taken the time to listen. Thank you guys, truly.
All right. Bye, guys, and we'll see you on the next episode where we'll continue convincing you to try new things. Go Birds!